All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 128. And today, we're going to answer the question, what is an Artificer? If anyone doesn't know, Wizards of the Coast recently announced that a new book is coming out, an actual new rules expansion, which is called something that I totally know what it is and didn't just forget it because my brain doesn't like proper nouns. They are releasing a new book beginning of August called Eberron, Forge of the Artificer. And it's basically how they're reintroducing the Artificer class into D&D 5.5. They have already done an Unearthed Arcana where they showed off the new Artificer. It was okay. Like, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't amazing either. And to be honest, I actually really like the 5th edition version of the Artificer because it's a fun class to play, and there's a lot of different stuff that you can do with it. So in honor of the announcement of this new book, I thought we would go back into our what is a series and talk about the Artificer. So first things first, where did the Artificer come from? The Artificer is kind of effectively just like a magic item / magic tinkerer style character. They use magic as a kind of power source for their creations. And the first version of the Artificer actually showed up the end of AD&D 2nd edition. There was a book that came out in 96, which is really tail end of 2nd edition. As much as 3rd edition didn't come out until the year 2000. After player option spells and magic, if I remember correctly, like the number of books that were coming out was starting to slow down. So the book that the Artificer was originally introduced in was Player Options, Spells, and Magic in 1996. And it was actually introduced as a specialty within the school of thaumaturgy. So specialty mages in or specialty wizards in 2nd edition, the basics of these specialties were if you were just your base wizard, you could learn any spells that you want, but you had slightly less spells. If you were a specialist wizard, like if you were a conjurer or an illusionist or something like that, where you focused on one particular school, you'd be able to prepare an additional spell per day. And I don't know if that got higher and higher. I never actually played the tabletop version of 2nd edition. Most of my knowledge comes from the rather numerous number of video games that use 2nd edition. So specialist wizards got at least from low levels, they got an additional spell per day, and as to kind of balance that off, they were forbidden from casting spells from schools of magic that were kind of the antithesis of theirs. So the original Artificer was a specialty within, again, the thaumaturgy school of magic that specifically focused on spells that infused magic into non-living items. And according to the Wikipedia article on it, specifically into or through non-living items for their own personal use. And so they couldn't use enchantment and charm school spells that happened to affect living things, again, directly from Wikipedia. And they couldn't do anything from the necromancy school, because that's all about, I mean, technically not living things, but they used to be living, and then they become unliving things. Yeah, the first version of the Artificer introduced that idea of, yeah, they're kind of arcane tinkerer type things. But when we start getting into the what most people think of as artificers nowadays, was actually introduced in 3.5 as part of the Eberron campaign setting. There was a prestige class artificer that was a gnome prestige class, meaning you had to be a gnome in order to take that particular prestige class. But when the Eberron campaign setting came out in 2004, they introduced the Artificer as a base class. And the thing that the Artificer did that better than any other class was they could make magic items, which was not something that was unique to the Artificer. There's actually a create magic item, or actually a few different create magic item skills. Like there's create, I think there's like craft armor and craft weapon, and there's a few different flavors of skills that you would have to invest skill points into to be able to create magic items. But the thing was, whenever you created magic items, there was an experience point cost associated with it. So if you wanted to make that really cool flaming sword, you had to sacrifice some of your experience to do that, meaning you would have a cool new weapon, but you would be behind the rest of the party as far as experience points were concerned. The Artificer could do that by using these craft reserve points. So they had a specific limited resource that they could use to create magic items. And then they also, like, they were real good at dealing with, like, constructs and anything like that. And they also got a companion. They could create a homunculus companion at 4th level. And I thought there were ways for artificers artificers to actually have a little pet companion. Like the Battlesmith in 5th edition has their battle construct, or whatever it's called. And I thought they had a version of that in 3rd edition, but I'm not seeing it on the 2 paragraphs they have about it on Wikipedia. And I do not have access to the Eberron campaign setting from 3rd edition to be able to look at. But, so yeah, that's where we start getting artificers and kind of how we imagine artificers now. These kind of arcane tinkerers, and they build stuff, they create magic items. When we get to 4th edition, they actually made them part of the leader role. And they were these kind of hyper buff style leaders where even their at-will attack powers a lot of times would buff allies and things like that. They're actually a super, super fun class to play. And one of the things I really liked about the Artificer in 4th edition was they could take a feat that allowed them to use a crossbow as their as a magic focus. So they were literally crossbow wizards, and they were super cool and interesting. Then we get to the 5th edition of a version of it. It showed up as an Unearthed Arcana, and then eventually when they released Eberron Rising from the Last War, which was the Eberron campaign setting for 5th edition, they introduced the Artificer officially to 5th edition, and then with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything the next year, they revised the Artificer and added in the Armorer subclass. And so the Artificer, again, in and of itself, hasn't changed a ton since its first introduction. Again, the 2nd edition version of it was still very much kind of that like buffing that buffing kind of wizard tinkerer style thing. But the crafting options for magic items and stuff like that was not as big a part of the second edition Artificer. Once we get into third edition, that's kind of the Artificer that everybody thinks about even now, 20 years later. They have their little mechanical dog, and they make magic items, and they're very tinkery and making all this other stuff. They're really good at dealing with robots and other things like that. And then the most recent version of it even simplified the item crafting even more, just because there isn't or there wasn't when it first came out, an actual way to build magic items. There wasn't like an arcane forging ability in 5th edition. And so they just created this extremely simple process that they call infusions, but it still allowed them to basically just make magic items whenever they wanted. So yeah. So as far as designing an Artificer style class, the first thing that we have to do is we have to full on define, well, what do we mean by an Artificer? So as I mentioned before, the kind of idea of an Artificer is a magic user that creates magic powered gadgets and things like that. If we look at again, taken from the Wikipedia page, there was an interview with Skip Williams, who was one of the co-creators of 3rd edition and was the author of Sage Advice for a while. He specifically said this in an interview. The Artificer class represents an approach to magic that's a little different from spellcasting as presented in the player's handbook. To an Artificer, magic is neither arcane nor divine, but a force to be captured and infused into items. So effectively, an Artificer views magic as a power source and uses that power source to power various inventions, designs, or other things like that. And so that's kind of how I want to define it, because I think it fits really well and it gives us a broad enough definition that we can kind of go a lot of different ways. So official definition: Artificer is a magic-based tinkerer that views magic as a power source useful in powering their creations. So, thank you, phone. So, what do we need to do to create an Artificer in just any old tabletop RPG? Well, as I've mentioned in other What is a series videos, there needs to be some kind of underlying systems for certain things to work. Like for the fighter to work, well, there needs to be not only a combat system, but a weapon system. Because fighters are known for their ability with weapons. And if you're going to be making a wizard, there needs to be some kind of a magic system built into it. Well, for an Artificer, we need to have a magic system. However, in addition to that, we need to have some kind of a magic item system, because that's the thing that the Artificer is going to specialize in. Again, just like the fighter, where the weapon system that we need for the fighter in order to exist is not going to be exclusively used by the fighter. Anyone can use weapons. Fighters are just the best at using them. The same thing is going to be true about the Artificer. A lot of these magic items, or the magic item system in and of itself, is going to be something that everyone can use. And if you have played a tabletop RPG, with a few exceptions, most tabletop RPGs have some sort of quote-unquote magic item system. And when I say magic item, I'm not specifically referring to an item that can cast spells or has had a spell cast on it, but basically special items that give you different abilities or do something different than the standard version of that item. Or items that only exist to give you the ability to do something differently. If we look at something like the Essence 20 system, well, the Essence 20 system doesn't have magic items. Yes, it does. They're referred to as upgraded. There are various different upgrades that you can apply to a bunch of different weapons, and those allow you to do things that your class or your role, your origin, and your... Wow, brain is just gone right now. I can't even remember how Essence 20 works. Sorry about it. Like my brain is just gone. Origin role influence. There we go. So yeah. So the equipment and the upgrades are the things that allow you to do things that you don't get from your role, your origin, or your influences. So there are magic items in Essence 20. They are just referred to as upgrades. If we look at something like the cipher system, ciphers are kind of like magic items, but they also have, I think they're called artifacts, which are effectively permanent ciphers. Or if we look at Open Legend, they have special items or unique items that allow you to do things. They will give you access to banes and boons you normally don't have, or will modify certain aspects of your character, things like that. So magic item systems exist in almost every tabletop RPG in some way, shape, or form. And so in this magical imaginary tabletop RPG that we've been designing over the past year or two here, creating a magic item system is actually not nearly as difficult as it sounds. If you're just going to introduce magic items, that actually makes things significantly easier, because you can just kind of say, okay, well, these are the magic items available to you, and these are the guidelines that we use to kind of come up with these. If it's a weapon, it can only do this much additional damage, or it can only do this thing or that. You know, those things are pretty easy. If you're going to create a magic item crafting system, that becomes significantly more complex. And I don't think for an Artificer class to exist, you really need to have an item crafting system that exists for everybody. I think that could be something that we do actually limit to the Artificer in order for them to still feel special and to kind of feed into that kind of class fantasy of the Artificer. All right, so we have a magic item system. Now we need a way for the Artificer to interact with that system. One of the ways the Artificer is able to interact with that system in 5th edition is they can actually attune to more magic items than other classes. The attunement system is one of the balancing features of 5th edition that I actually like, because it does prevent kind of super broken builds of, oh, I'm just going to get all these different magic items and make myself super invincible. Nope, you get 3. That's it. So one of the things that you can do for an Artificer is simply allow them to use magic items more often than your standard player. If you have a kind of magic item limitation system, the Artificer can either ignore it, or maybe gets additional uses of it, or something along that effect. In 4th edition, you could only use so many daily powers from magic items, because certain magic items that have daily powers built into the magic item. And Artificers could eventually learn, I think it was either through feats, I think is what it was, to be able to use more daily powers from magic items. Yeah, the idea of, well, they can either have more magic items than other ones, or they can use them more often, whether you use like a charge system on magic items, and then Artificers can give extra charges, or just ignore using a charge every so often under certain circumstances. All of those things will make the Artificer feel really powerful when they have access to magic items. However, if you are going to exclusively focus on the idea that artificers are roll go with magic items, that means that technically the dungeon master or game master gets to control when an artificer gets to be an artificer and when they don't. Because if the game master isn't giving out magic items or is taking them away for whatever reason, the artificer becomes next to useless. So in addition to their ability to interact with this magic item system, they have to have something else that they can do. And that's where we get into the kind of magic item creation aspect of the Artificer. Now, again, we can go the 5th edition version, which is kind of a significantly more simplified version of the 3rd edition version of the Artificer, which is they can make their own magic items. And again, if you want to make the Artificer feel really creative and interesting, making it exclusive to Artificers to where no other class is allowed to create their own custom magic items can be a very interesting thing, because especially if you give them the ability to take mundane items and turn them into magic. That means that not only are they going to feel very powerful, but their team is going to feel more powerful, because their Artificer will be able to make and customize magic items for every single person on the team. And that's something that feels really, really cool. So coming up with some kind of either magic item crafting system, or I think what would be easier to implement is kind of a Essence 20 style upgrade system, where they can take certain items and then upgrade them with certain effects. And a really easy way to limit how powerful items can be is simply to use a kind of rarity system. A common item can have this many upgrades. Uncommon, this many. Rare, very rare. However you want to create your different tiers of rarity. Each different version of rarity can have so many upgrades associated with it. You probably need to have some sort of limited resource that is required to be spent in order to put the upgrades in. And then one of the things that I tend to prefer over the idea of, well, I have to go out and find a rare quality item or buy a rare quality item to be able to do it, is just to give Artificers the ability to upgrade something from a common to uncommon to rare, things like that. Again, associated with some limited resource. It might be associated with the currency system in your game. So Artificers can effectively be a money sink for the party. Yes, if we give the Artificer so much money, they can make me a cooler... They can make my already cool greatsword into an even cooler greatsword. Yeah. So you can go that route, or you can make it more lore based. Like if you want to upgrade something from this to this, then you have to do this particular thing or go to this particular place. And the smaller upgrades should be relatively simple. Maybe make like going from common to uncommon just some gold. But going from like epic to legendary requires you going to a certain forge or a certain place and destroying a certain kind of monster or something in order to get it to that level. Those are all things that, again, are going to make it so that your Artificer is not basically turning into a little magic item factory, but also makes them feel kind of powerful and needed in the party. And then the final kind of decision that you can make is basically what upgrades are available to a particular Artificer. You can limit it by basically giving them an a la carte board. Like when they level up, you can learn, these, you can learn 3 of these 9 upgrades at this level, and you go, okay, I'll do this. And then when you reach this level, you can get these other upgrades and stuff like that, and that can work. But because they're not going to be exclusively making items for themselves, they're going to be doing it for the whole party. That kind of limitation to the upgrades system will probably not be as much fun as it could be, because not only do they have to make decisions on, well, what's going to be the best for my build, they also have to consider, well, what's going to be best for the rest of the party. And that can start making you feel much more like, oh, I'm not actually playing a character, I'm playing a magic item factory. So while that is an option for you to create some limitations, I think a better option is to just tie certain upgrades to some sort of limited resource. Whether it's you have to go out and get a certain type of ore in order to be able to do it, or you have to buy certain the things. Again, using it as a money sink is a viable way. But adding just some additional step can, again, still make it so that they can make the items that they want, but it requires them to be a little bit more invested in the upgrades that they want to do. And then always, you can always put time limitations as well. Like, well, if you want to put this particular upgrade on, you can, but it's going to take a week, a month, something like that. So that the players have to go, okay, well, either I'm going to adventure with a different weapon for that particular amount of time, or we're just not going to adventure for that amount of time. We have to come up with other things the other characters are doing while you're building the super cool greatsword. So the final aspect of an Artificer that I think we need to talk about is Artificer gadgets. Things that the Artificer can make that, again, give them the ability to do things they normally couldn't. The one that's probably the most well known, and again, I have to go and remember what they are called. There we go. Battlesmith. Steel Defender, that's what they're called. So, for me, one of the iconic gadgets for an Artificer to create is a Steel Defender. Effectively a pet class. We talked about, pet classes and stuff like that when we were talking about the Ranger and kind of how to do that. I'm going to try this one more time because my brain is just not working today, guys. Helps if I hit the right button. Yeah. Sorry, just reviewing notes and things like that. So, pet classes and the things like that. Again, if you're going to create a pet style creature, that can be an option for an Artificer's gadgets that they can create. There should be some kind of limitation. And I think for Artificer gadgets, the a la carte board, I think, works significantly better, because gadgets are going to be things that only the Artificer can use. So I think giving them an a la carte board would work. And because a battle companion is going to require or is going to do so much more than just like a single gadget will ever be able to do, I think making, if you want to have a battle companion, having that take multiple choices of your a la carte board would make sense. And then, again, just having the ability to fight alongside it, as opposed to, like, the early 5th edition version, which was, well, you have to not do things if you want your companion to do things, or the 4th edition version, which was basically the same thing, where you would sacrifice your major action to have your summon or companion do something, unless you had specific powers that'll let you attack in tandem. So that's one way. But the rest of the gadgets again shouldn't purely be focused on, well, this will let me cast fireball. Like there's already a spell system that exists, and artificers are not really supposed to treat magic like wizards do. So just giving them gadget versions of spells that already exist, I think, is kind of insulting to the idea of the artificer. Give them things that spells can't do. Give them a grapple gun that allows them to, maybe climb surfaces and move enemies scorpion style. Get over here, shoomp. That would be something that'd be really interesting. And just because there are spells that do something similar to that, like Thorny Vines or Thorn Whip, I think is what it's called. The Artificer version just needs to be a little bit different enough that it makes sense that it works differently. Maybe a longer range, maybe the ability to interact with things that Thorn Whip wouldn't be able to interact. And generally the most useful aspect, if there is some sort of like counter system, like counter spell system in your game, an Artificer, because they're not casting spells, the things that limit spells are not going to limit the Artificer, whereas things that limit magic items will limit the Artificer. So having a few different gadgets that allow them to do things, like maybe you have extendo gloves that allow them to attack with melee weapons from a longer range, or jumpy boats that allows them to like jump over enemies so that they can maneuver better, or jump really high to get up to higher places and things like that. There's a lot of different things that you can do that are not going to feel like they're just, oh, this is the gadget version of this spell. So yeah, I think overall an Artificer that uses all of those systems would be really, really fun. If you want to focus on maybe like 2 of those systems instead of like all 3 or anything like that, you can go that route as well. But I think having all those aspects makes for a really interesting character. A little bit difficult to balance, but worse things have happened. Interested to hear from you guys. First of all, what is your opinion on the new Artificer? What's it called again? Eberron, Forge of the Artificer. Do you like that? Digital version's $20. Do you like paying $20 for a new Artificer book? It doesn't just come with the Artificer, by the way. Comes with the Artificer with all 4 of the subclasses that already exist, and they're introducing the Cartographer. Again, that was also shown in a Unearthed Arcana, so none of this stuff is real surprising. They have 5 new species, 17 backgrounds, and 28 new feats. Then a bunch of spells and magic items, and then some new monsters. So it's not just, oh, I'm paying $20 for a new class. But what's your opinion on that? And then, what's your opinion on Artificers in general? Do you like the idea of Artificers? Do you really hate the kind of magical tinkerer things? You're like, no, magic is magic, and technology is technology, and they don't come together. Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, it's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.